Do you want to find members of your family tree or some missing treasure? Do you think someone might be related to a famous person or event? I'm Sian Williams, and this is My Family Secrets Revealed. We've gathered a team of historical and ancestry experts to solve intriguing family mysteries.
So let me take you time travelling.
To find this missing part of your family.
After poring over birth records, doing DNA tests and building family trees...
Terence's father
Yes.
and Charles Craig's father were brothers.
They'll reunite people with long-lost treasures.
That's brilliant, that. I can't thank you enough.
Investigate links to famous faces.
I mean, I'll be amazed if you found this connection, but it would be wonderful.
And solve family puzzles about missing relatives.
How could he leave his family? She was pregnant.
There'll be scandal along the way.
He is accused of fraud.
Stories of heroism.
This is a medal awarded to those prisoners of war who did acts of extreme courage.
There'll be new family to discover.
So your family's just got a lot bigger.
Wow.
Unexpected surprises.
I wonder if you recognise this man.
It's my dad, yeah.
And a chance for people to find out who their ancestors really were.
Wow, what a day.
Coming up today, a teacher wanting to track down the rogues in her family.
It's always interesting when you find an ancestor who's been a bit of a villain, but living through it must have been a very different thing.
A woman keen to solve a family puzzle with a link to an Australian convict.
It has been a huge quest, and it will be a legacy for my family, and I'm sure they're looking down now, willing us on to finish something that we started so many years ago.
And a grandmother searching for clues about the true identity of a mysterious ancestor.
So we didn't know where he was from, what nationality he was, at all.
Welcome to Capesthorne Hall, a historic stately home in Macclesfield in Cheshire, where people from all over the UK have been flocking to have their questions answered. Crowds have arrived to meet our experts in the hope of solving their family mysteries.
I wanted to know about my father's side of the family because my maiden name is Trevina, which is very unusual.
I wanted to come today to meet actual experts who could guide me and point me in the right direction to carry on my research.
To help them uncover the answers to their questions are our team of specialists. Writer and historian Tessa Dunlop.
He's a bit of a chameleon, isn't he? He tells stories, he changes his name.
It's a fibber.
Ancestry genealogist Brad Argent.
Obviously, not being caught.
I like that.
But first, historian and law lecturer Onyeka Nubia helps one woman who suspects she might have relatives in Australia through a convict who was transported down under.
I'm Sandra Cummings. I live in a little village called Brixworth in Northamptonshire. So this story began back in 1993. My father, Anthony Byfield, received a letter from Greg Byfield in New South Wales in Australia. The letter went into detail about the Byfield family and the fact that he was interested in us because we may be related. So the letter explained a little bit about his great-great-grandfather, Robert Byfield. So Greg knew that Robert lived in Shoreditch in London and was transported in 1834 to Sydney on a convict ship, but that's the only information he had about that relative. And the letter just caused ripples through the family, to be honest. We'd never heard anything like it. We started to then investigate the archives. It was very much my dad's quest. He was very interested in the whole project. But unfortunately, within 2 years of Greg contacting, my dad passed away. And that's when my mother and I took on the challenge. There was lots of Roberts in the family, which got me really excited that we could possibly be related in some way. My mother passed away in 2011, so it's a shame that we didn't get any further. It has been a huge quest, and it will be a legacy for my family, and I'm sure they're looking down now, hoping that they're willing us on to finish something that we started so many years ago.
Hello, and welcome, Sandra.
Thank you.
So, you want to find out about the Byfield family, or your family history. So this Greg Byfield claimed that his great-great-grandfather, Robert Byfield, was a convict from England who went to Sydney, Australia in 1834 on a convict ship.
That's right.
And believed that you, your family, were direct descendants of the same Byfield.
Yes.
How would you feel if this was true?
Oh, it'd be amazing.
So let's look at your family tree. Greg suggested in his letter that this Robert Byfield was convicted and sentenced to transportation in 1834. Now, Robert Benjamin Byfield, your 2 times great-grandfather, was born in 1857. So it couldn't possibly be him.
So is it the Robert from 1859?
Well, we're going to find out.
OK.
OK, let's have a look at this. So this is a marriage certificate from 1850 for Samuel Byfield and Sarah Willis. Samuel Byfield is listed as a cellarman, and his father, Robert Byfield, is a tailor. And what we have to try and work out is if this Robert Byfield, who's the tailor, could end up being the convict.
Yeah. That's a big jump down,
It's a big jump, isn't it?
Yeah. OK.
So, because Greg, your pen pal, has suggested that we look at Shoreditch, we began to look at records in Shoreditch to see if we could find a link to this Robert Byfield. This is another document that we have. If you look at the right-hand side...
Oh, yeah, so Robert.
The tailor, Robert Byfield.
Really? The
yes,
4
the original
times?
one. Yeah. And this original Robert Byfield is married to Susanna Barlow in 1815.
Wow.
And they married in the parish of Shoreditch.
OK.
So we needed to find out if Robert Byfield, the patriarch...
Is the same.
Yes, if somehow he fell from grace.
It just seems so strange for a tailor to be shipped off to Australia. What could he have done?
Indeed. 19th century England, there was a lot of poverty.
Sure, yeah.
So we checked and we examined a very important resource. They're called the Old Bailey Online Records.
OK.
They contain lists of all the proceedings, court proceedings, that took place in the Old Bailey during the 18th and the 19th century. Now, there were proceedings against a Robert Byfield.
Really? OK.
In 1834.
OK.
And this Robert Byfield, in 1834, was indicted for feloniously breaking and entering a dwelling in Shoreditch.
Right.
And he was accused of stealing diverse monies. But in those court proceedings, his occupation is listed as a...
Tailor?
As a cowman.
Oh, right. Not a tailor.
Not a tailor.
OK. So it's not the same Robert?
He doesn't match your patriarch.
Right, OK.
Your great ancestor.
I'm disappointed. We all so wanted there to be a connection.
Indeed.
Between the two.
But don't leave your seat yet. Okay. Don't leave your seat yet.
Onyeka has ruled out 2 possible options for Sandra's convict, but coming up, we'll see the results for the other links to Australia in her family tree.
Robert Byfield fell into poverty.
Right, OK.
Now, we'd all like to find a colourful character in our family past, even if they might be a bit of a rogue. Next up is Amy Jane McGarry Thickett from Northamptonshire, who thinks she might have a bit of a shady past and might be related to hoodlums and thieves.
You would use a while loop when you're using, like, conditional. My name's Amy. I live in Nottingham, but I'm originally from Gosport near Portsmouth. I teach computer science, and I've become very much a genealogy geek. I want to find out exactly who I am and where I come from, and more about my dad's side of the family, because we were estranged for a long time. I know that there's been a lot of toing and froing from Ireland, and I'd love to be connected to that. The Kennedys and the Smalls are my father's mother's families. Kennedys, from what I've seen, it seems like there was quite a bit of trouble. There are a lot of articles about Kennedys being in court for this and in court for that, involving, I think there was one stealing a horse or something. I'd like to think that they're more artful dodger than Peaky Blinders, but it's hard to tell with the little bits that I've got. Yes. I think the Smalls were a bit more respectful. I'm not a troublemaker, I'm not very daring, so I'm hoping that the Smalls are like me and that, you know, good and honest and hard-working sort of people. That'd be amazing. It would just make me feel, I don't know, a bit more whole and a bit more content in who I am as a person.
Amy, welcome.
Thank you.
So you're here today to find out about potentially some troublemakers in the family.
Yeah, it's on my dad's mum's side of the family, so my paternal grandmother. I want to find out which of the family, sides of the family, the Kennedys or the Smalls, were the troublemakers, because I found articles that kind of linked to both.
So let's just have a look at your family tree. So we're starting with you. And so the persons of interest to us are Francis J. Kennedy, right, father of Francis J. Kennedy, and Hugh Small, right? He's the father of Elizabeth Ann Small. So let's dive into the records and see what we get. We wanted to look at the Kennedy line first. Now, this is for Francis J. Kennedy Jr. This is his birth record.
I've never seen this before.
And here in this document, you can see Francis Joseph, right? It's the 10th of April in 1911. His father is Francis Joseph Kennedy. And then we have Mary Ann Kennedy, nee McCafferty. And this is where they're popping up in the traditional hatch, match and dispatch records. But the thing is, they don't seem to surface anywhere else. Our sort of feelings were, whilst the Kennedys might not have been squeaky clean, they were well behaved enough to stay out of the documents.
Local news.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to turn our attention somewhere else. And the other family is the Small family. Hugh Thomas Small. And they're in Belturbet in Ireland. So we started having a look at who were these people, what was going on. And we found this record. This is the Court of Petty Sessions. Apparently, what he got up to was maliciously killing the neighbour's cat. Now, it's an accusation. I don't believe it was proved.
Well, no witnesses.
You should familiarise yourself with these records because they're going to come in handy when you're looking at the Smalls.
Oh, good.
Because they're something of a recurring theme. Now, let's put Hugh in some context. There's a wonderful photograph of him. And there he is there. And that is Hugh Thomas Small. He does look like a bit of a grumpy.
The only thing that I do know from my nan's time in Ireland was that she hated it and she hated being under his roof. That's all I know, so that makes sense when you see that picture.
He doesn't look happy, does he? That appearance in the records, it is just the beginning. So these are quite serious assault charges, right? John Patrick tells the Court of Petty Sessions that Hugh Thomas Small assaulted and hurt him. And because of that, he had to pay 3 shillings and 6pence. Or the alternative was to be sent to jail for a week. I kind of, again, painting this picture of a man who's not happy to be around others.
No. I imagine that he wasn't very nice. From what I know, what I saw of my gran, she didn't like being around people that much either. She was a very solitary person.
But you're getting some sense, I think, of
why.
Of why and the environment that she grew up in. It's always interesting when you find an ancestor who's,
Yeah.
you know, been a bit of a villain. But living through it must have been a very different thing. But it doesn't end at this record. Now, this is 1907, and this is for unlawfully abusing, using offensive language, and breaching peace against a James Bryceland. But his brother, John Small, was also involved in this. So he managed to loop someone else in to this. This wasn't the final record, and this is actually a prison record. This is for selling intoxicating liquor in an unlicensed home. There's a very vivid description of him in this document. He's 37 years old at this time. He's 5 foot 8.5 inches tall, brown hair, blue eyes. His occupation at this time is actually stated as a publican and farmer, but it also says he's down for contempt of court and bankruptcy, right, with an unlimited stay in jail. So he seems to be a man who's plying multiple trades.
It's shocking to see that it wasn't the side I thought, and really the troublemakers were the Smalls, and maybe that's why there was so much issue about my nan talking about her childhood, because there's someone there clearly with a temper. It's interesting, and it's quite, I don't know, it's a lot to consider and take in a way.
How do you think Sheila would feel about you finding this stuff out?
I don't think she'd be overly happy about it, but I think if I'd known it sooner, it would have made it easier to talk and to be open and to have an actual relationship with me, my dad and everything.
Yeah, do you feel you understand her a little better now?
Yeah, definitely.
But we're not finished with him yet.
Right.
The last entry that we can find is the Court of Petty Sessions again, 1918. And this time, in keeping with his entrepreneurial spirit, he's accused of unlawfully buying 5 pig carcasses in somewhere other than a lawfully constituted pork market. You wanted to find the troublemaker?
He was there all along.
Yeah. And we found him.
Lovely. Thank you. It's
Amy,
really interesting.
Thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you. Yeah, clearly, I'm amazing stock. Luckily, I think it's far enough away to not to be an effect on my character. I don't think I'm going to have any kids accusing me of killing their cats or anything back at work. I definitely think I want to take a trip over to Ireland sometime and see Belturbet and all of that area, and just not mention that I'm related to any Smalls that are there.
Brad has given Amy a clearer picture of her ancestors and the events which shaped the family. Earlier, we met Sandra Cummings, who's desperate to find out if she and her family are linked to an English convict, Robert Byfield, who was sent to Australia. Onyeka has ruled out some of her ancestors.
This Robert Byfield doesn't match your patriarch.
Right, OK.
Your great ancestor.
But now he believes he might have the answer.
But we began to research poor law records.
OK.
In the 1800s, there was a fear that the masses, the poor masses, would take over society. So they felt that the poor had to be controlled.
Yes.
Part of the method of control was to make laws and provide relief for the poor, but also to make records of them.
OK.
To record who they were, to record their families. Your patriarch, the tailor, Robert Byfield, fell into poverty.
Right, OK.
This is a record from the poor law books. This is the tailor, Robert Byfield, and his wife. Now, this document is very important because it shows that Robert Byfield had children. This is a record that says Robert Byfield, his wife, Susanna, and their 4 children, namely Robert.
So he had a Robert as well? Of 16? Is that the Robert? No.
So there is another Robert in your family. This poor law record is from 1832.
Right, and he's 16?
Yes. So in 1834, he would be about 19 years old.
Wow.
So this Robert Byfield is the same
Really?
Byfield that Greg Byfield wrote to you about?
That's amazing. Sorry. That's really wonderful.
So your father was absolutely correct. His instincts were absolutely correct. And your trust in your father's judgment
Yes.
was absolutely correct. Let's take a look at your extended family tree. If we start from the top, Robert Byfield married Susanna Barlow. Robert Byfield was the patriarch of your family in 1815. Their first son was Robert Byfield.
Wow.
The one that was sent to Australia as a convict. His brother was your direct ancestor, Samuel Byfield.
And Greg's.
And Greg is a direct descendant of Robert Byfield Jr.
Wow. So all this time, that first letter, and it was all true.
So Robert Byfield Jr. is your 3 times great-grand uncle.
Cool.
English law had split your family apart.
Absolutely.
And separated your family by oceans and thousands of miles. Your father and your mother attempted to bring your family together, but they weren't able to do so in their lifetime. So now you are the one who has brought your family together.
Yes.
After all of these years, after hundreds of years.
And close that loop.
And close that.
Yeah. That's brilliant. I wish they were here now, Mum and Dad, to see it. Thank you.
Good news, Sandra.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, yeah. I'm going to contact Greg and tell him it's all true and hopefully reconnect with that family in Australia.
And you've managed to complete the journey that your mum and dad started.
Absolutely.
It must be so important.
Yes. Both my father and my mother would be amazed, yeah. It just connects you all together. It's amazing.
I'm really pleased,
Thank
really
you.
pleased. Sandra, thank you so much for bringing your story to us today.
Thank you for everybody. I couldn't have done it without you. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Our research has confirmed that the convict Robert Byfield is Sandra's 3 times great-granduncle, which has opened up the possibility of a whole new branch of relatives in Australia to uncover. Coming up, Brad helps a man learn the truth about his mother's family.
She was very, very careful not to mention anything.
Well, let's see if we can unpick some of that.
Next up, Cynthia Richards from Cheshire. She wants to solve a mystery in her husband's family involving a runaway, false records, and an exotic twist.
My name is Cynthia Richards, and I'm here to find out about Henry Richards, my husband Frank's grandfather. When I started looking into Henry, I didn't know anything about him at all, apart from the fact that he said he was born on a ship. He was 16 when he got to England. It was on the 1891 census. And he was living in a cellar with 6 other people that, looking at the census, were complete strangers. The names were different, and working on the docks. Frank, my husband, is 80 next year. He's not very, very good health-wise, and at Christmas he nearly died. So I would love for him to know who his family are. And I think at this stage in his life, it would be very special for him.
Cynthia, thank you for coming here today.
Thank you.
I gather you're on a mission to find out more about one man who's related to the 2 gentlemen sat behind you.
That's right, he's a grandfather.
Who are they?
Frank in the middle, my husband.
Hello, Frank.
54 years.
Well done.
And Joe, my brother-in-law, Frank's brother.
So, let's now focus on this gentleman, Henry Richards. The story is he was born on a ship.
We didn't know where he was from, what nationality he was at all. This was the story I was told. So that sort of sparked my interest of finding out.
And you've got now to the point where you've ascertained he's probably from America.
Mm-hmm. That was on the census. It said he was born in the US of America. That was the first time that we found out.
But was certainly in England by the age of 15, 16.
16, yeah.
And your belief is he came alone?
Yes.
OK, well, let's bear in mind all that. We have found quite a lot on this individual, Henry Richards. It's taken us down a path that we didn't expect, and one we believe will probably surprise you.
Good.
Let's just have a look at Henry Richards, Frank and Joe's grandfather's immediate family tree. He married Martha.
That's correct.
And boy, weren't they busy. 8 children.
Yeah.
And you'll see one name, Clarice. It's quite an unusual name.
Clarice, yeah.
For 1900 in England. I would suggest maybe. One of the earliest documents that was available from the get-go for Henry Richards was his marriage certificate.
That's right.
In 1896. And just one thing that stood out, because I pointed out the name Clarice, was another slightly fancy name, or exotic for that time, Alexandra. His middle name was Henry Alexander Richards. Yeah. And you're right, there's another, you see, a Samuel Ferdinand.
Yeah.
So quite fancy names.
I don't know where they came from, yeah.
When you're on a genealogy hunt, sometimes the documentation can be flaky or let you down or not add up in the way you expect it to.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to sort of read between the lines and pick on any clue that you can, which is why I'm flagging up these names. Now, I'm going to reintroduce you to the document that you've already mentioned, that census in 1891. This is the earliest evidence we have of Henry Richards, the wanderer, who has arrived in England by the age of 16. And here we have him. He's 16, you can see the 16. He's a docks labourer, as you said, and if you stroll further along, he's American.
That's right.
Consistently, in all documentation that we had available for Henry Richards, he said that his birth date was 1875. But we could never find a Henry Richards born in 1875. In a census, you bunch all the people who are living together at any one time. Here he is. Now, if you track up in that same house, there's a Clarice. Do you remember that Henry's daughter he would later call Clarice? This isn't his daughter. He's only 16 years old. You can see she's the other person on this census from America. So she's 19 from America.
So she's come from America.
Which suggests a name similarity, an age similarity, living in the same house, and both from America. Could be siblings. If so, we need to find her, and that will lead us to her parents, which may then lead us to Henry and his birth certificate. I'm now going to take you to America. This is her birth certificate. You can see there, Jean Clarice Richard. She's born in New York. You'll notice it's Richard she's listed under. She's the second child of her mother. And let's just have a look at the parentage. Her mother, Anne Elizabeth Richard, née Smith, is English. What I'm telling you here, Cynthia, because it's quite complicated, is Clarice Richard is the sister of Henry Richards. OK? They're living in the same house in Liverpool in 1891. They're both from America. This girl is born 3 years before her brother Henry, and here we have her parentage. She's got an English mother, which may explain why they end up back in England, going against the grain of immigration at the time. But what's really interesting is the father, none other than a Ferdinand Francois Richard. Their grandfather had a father who was French, born in France.
Why didn't he say that? Why didn't he say, come up with the story he came out with?
Well, I'm afraid that's what we'll probably never know. And you're a Frank, which is probably a Francis, but could be a Francois.
It is Francis,
It's the Anglicanized version.
I'll never get over this with him now. He's French.
And now, because we know he's born in 1875, and we know that we can't find a Henry Richards in any birth registry in New York at that time, but using the parents of Clarice, Anne and Ferdinand, knowing them and their names, meant that we could finally uncover the birth certificate for Henry Richards. I talked about names changing and how names were anglicised, and it seems evident that that is what Henry Richards went in for, because here he is, born to Anne and Ferdinand in 1875, consistent with what he's always said about his birth date, 1875, in New York, same place as his sister was born. But look at his name, Julien Alexis Richard, Richard. So later it becomes Richards. Why Julien becomes Henry, I don't know.
No. I have no idea at all. I'm flabbergasted.
He's a bit of a chameleon, isn't he? He tells stories, he changes his names.
Pepper. All these years now to be married to a Scouser. I just can't believe it, I really can't.
we uncovered 2 more younger siblings. Well, younger than
There's
Clarice.
4 children there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. He's one of the 4th. In fact, we think in total there were 5.
Were there?
We were able to name 4. And here on the family tree are the names that we were able to ascertain. We have Henry Richards. We have a brother called William Richard, born between Clarice and Henry. And there was also a Samuel Richard. What's interesting here is if you look at Samuel Richard's dates, 1877 to 1889.
Wasn't very old, was he?
The death index in Liverpool confirms that this youngest child of Ferdinand and Anne died aged 12.
In Liverpool?
Yes.
So they all came to Liverpool then?
All those children came to Liverpool. And that name, of course, crops up again because Henry Richards, who loses his brother, what does he call his youngest son?
Samuel.
And Samuel Ferdinand is their father.
Yeah.
Of course, what's interesting about all of this is why take at least 4 children across the Atlantic against the economic grain of the time to England?
No idea.
Well, one clue, of course, is that Anne was English.
Yeah.
But why did she come back?
Yeah.
Well, let's now go back to that census of 1891.
Yeah.
And we've got our Henry Richards, who is S for son. Who's the person named above him?
Anne. Is that his mother?
And his mother was Anne Elizabeth. And if you look above her, Herbert Grosvenor, she's married a Herbert Grosvenor.
So her husband had died?
Either died, divorced, ditched. We couldn't find that out.
Right.
But she's begun again in England.
Right.
So this exuberant, exciting grandfather of Frank and Joe, Henry Richards, who apparently came over in a boat and then you discovered, actually, no, he was born in America. He came over when he was 15 or 16. Some of that is true. But what's interesting is, like so many Americans, his family were immigrants to America. Half French, half English.
I can't believe it, I really can't. It's really amazing, that, isn't it?
What bit surprises you?
Well, the fact that, why didn't he tell him his one parent was French? Why tell the story that he was born on a ship and he didn't know where he was from?
But maybe if something happened to force Anne to leave America, that was something that Henry Richards wanted to dump. Or possibly that's why the French story was never uncovered. It's been great fun, this. It's been quite intricate, but really exciting genealogy. And thank you, Cynthia, for bringing this amazing story.
Thank you, and au revoir. I just think it's wonderful because it's like a whole new family now to find out about, isn't it? And our granddaughter loves snails. And I've always thought, but obviously something inside is telling us to like them, isn't it?
We've helped Cynthia and Frank solve the mystery of his grandfather's birthplace and also uncovered that Henry was born to English and French parents. We all want to find an exciting story in our family. Up next, a mystery involving surprise DNA results, British children being shipped abroad, and a mother with a secret past.
He lived in a wood far, far away. He lived with
his mummy and daddy.
And
his grandpa.
I'm John Niblett. I have 3 children, and I'm from Walsall in the West Midlands. What's missing, basically, is my mother's family history.
Cheese and ketchup.
My mother's name is Monica Mary Blackwood, born 1913 at a location unknown. I was 19 when she passed away. Obviously, I have memories of her as a childhood, but that all changed 6 to 9 months ago when I decided to take a DNA test. After taking the DNA test, I received a message from Canada from a Mr. Jim Smith, who said that we were related by DNA, first and second cousins. We're nothing to do with Canada. I eventually got in touch with Jim Smith's daughter, Nikki, and they uncovered a soldier's Bible, which her grandfather had carried as a serving soldier with the Canadian First Army. In the back leaf of that Bible, my mother's name, Mary, is mentioned. I believe that Mary here, mentioned here, with a birthday the same as my mother, November the 5th, is Monica Mary, Mary being her middle name. And Nikki said they'd found a photograph of me sent in 1947 by my mother to James. That convinced me that Monica Mary, the mention in the Bible, is my mother, and that James Smith is my uncle. I want to find out my mother's family history. What happened to her family? She never chose to tell me, and I'd just love to find out.
So welcome, John.
Hi.
When you first took your DNA test, right, and you got that result back, that first cousin match, that must have been something of a shock because you thought your mother was an only child. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
So if we look at this family tree, there's you, there's your mum, Monica Mary. So as we move along this tree, you can see your newly discovered uncle, James, an aunt for you, Julia, and James's children, Jim and Walter.
Yes.
And grandparents.
Yes.
Now, you were told by this first cousin about Amy Harwood, which is your grandmother.
Correct.
So what's interesting here is Monica's maiden name, your mum's maiden name, is Blackwood. But when we look at possible parents, we have a Smith and a Harwood.
Yes.
We tried really hard to find information about Monica Blackwood. And just like you, we can't. We don't know where the Blackwood surname comes from.
She was very, very careful not to mention anything. She never did. I had an opinion that she might well have been adopted prior to 1926 when the Adoption Act was passed.
Well, let's see if we can unpick some of that. The DNA evidence is clear. There's a connection between you and your uncle. That family and understanding that family is the key to understanding your mother. It's highly likely she was a Smith first,
yes,
before she was a Blackwood. That's what we have to start looking for. We have a little bit of a look at your grandmother. So we began looking for Amy Harwood. We struggled. We couldn't find anything about Amy Harwood. It was almost as if she didn't exist. The time period we were looking for, the records just didn't exist for her. So we thought we'd have a look for an Amy Smith. And what we're able to find is, this is a clip from a newspaper that talks a little bit about Amy, right? And it gives us a little bit more insight into who this person was. Appearing before the court in a most filthy condition, 4 gypsies named Mary Smith, 65, and her daughters Amy Smith, Edith Smith, and Pheasant Smith, all of no fixed abode, were charged with sleeping out in Jobs Lane. We can't be 100% certain, but we're almost at that point, and we think that's your Amy Smith, that's your grandmother, and therefore your great-grandmother and your great-aunts. We believe they were probably Romany gypsies. When we look further into Amy, we find that she had at least one known alias. We're talking about people who live outside of the normal systems.
Yeah.
This is why we can't find a birth record, because there probably isn't one that exists. And then we found this record. So this is your grandmother, right? This record is from the Police Gazette in 1918 of the conviction of Amy. She was imprisoned for neglecting her children. And they found 3 children living in appalling conditions. Amy has a bit of a record. She has a bit of a history for larceny, deceit, those kind of things, fortune-telling. Her husband, we believe, died during the war.
Yes.
Right? So your grandfather's dead. Amy's probably struggling, right? She has 3 young children. How do you cope when you have these children and the main breadwinner dies and you're left to fend for them? The 3 children were put into care, right? Mary, James, Julia, And we know that your uncle, James, he was part of the child migration scheme. This was something that the government carried on, and it took orphan children, poor children, children who might have been in institutions, and spread them around the world to places where they were maybe put up for adoption. About 80,000 people over a particular period, I think up to 1925. We don't think the Mary that was taken was your mum. We actually think she had 4 children. We found this notice from the Leamington Spa Courier in 1916. And this refers to Amy being arrested. And you can see there that she's accompanied by a little girl. We think that little girl is your mother, Monica, making her the youngest, and that Mary was actually an older sister, which is why there's always been this question mark around when she was born. Because the Mary that you've been looking at was born around 1900, somewhere between 1900 and 1905. I don't think she ever went into care.
But still leaves the question, where did Blackwood come from? Unless Blackwood was her father.
So this is what we think happened. And again, we have to build a story based on little bits of information. We think Mary, the firstborn, James and Julia, went into care. We think Monica was probably put up for private adoption long before the Act in 26. And so we think she was adopted into a family possibly named Blackwood. We don't really know. In 4 years' time, in 2022, the 1921 census will come out. She's highly likely to be in that census, living with her adopted family. So, patience, John, patience. And you'll get the next key you need to unlock more of your mother's story. But if we have a look at your tree now, I mean, your family's just got a lot bigger. So we were able to build on the story of Amy, your grandmother, found this connection to the Romanis. It helped some things fall into place. And we built back to this great-grandmother. And this is a legacy now that you can pass down. They're connected to Romani gypsies. That's pretty cool. John, thank you so much for coming. It's been a real joy, mate. Thank you for sharing a story.
Thank you. Well, I never imagined I'd got Romani blood in me. I perhaps now understand my mother why she was so reticent about giving me information, or she didn't. And I understand that now. I feel sorry for her. But I hope, I am sure that I think she had a decent life, whoever adopted her. I think she was all right.
This is almost like you bringing back the memories of your mother that you didn't really have, and that's right. It's a big thing for you.
I never thought it'd happen. When you look at the family tree, there's a blank, but there's not a blank anymore. I got a sense of belonging.
You've got a big family to go and look for now.
I've got a big family.
John, enjoy it. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much.
It's been an emotional day for John, who's just learnt about his mother's Romani heritage and her potential adoption. The 1921 census becomes open to the public after 100 years due to privacy laws, and Brad believes that John will then learn more about his mother's adopted family. Well, it's been an exciting day here in Cheshire, solving mysteries and finding lost family. Do join us next time when we're going to be giving people the chance to find their place in history. Goodbye.